Hi guys, Steve Chilcote from ChilcoteForester.com. I am going to tell you a little bit about lime. I've been getting soil tests done and writing in my blog post about doing your soil test, how to interpret the soil test report, and what to do with it. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is lime, and I wrote a blog post, but nobody reads that, so I'm going to put a link to it down below, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up and the comments. You know, if you have something to add or you want to argue about some of these points, please comment and we'll talk about it. But I came up with 7 myths that I keep seeing come up on the internet all the time. So I'm going to take you through these, and the first one is that you need to apply Dolomitic limestone to a food plot because it has magnesium in it. If your soil test doesn't read that you need magnesium, don't use Dolomitic limestone. You get too much magnesium and that's not good. Now that's chemistry I'll go into in more detail somewhere else. That's not something I want to get into, but you don't need it. So it's more expensive too. So you just want to get pulverized limestone so you can get that calcium in there. Okay. If you do need magnesium, and it's called for in the soil test, then you want to apply a slightly higher rate because your calcium carbonate equivalent will be slightly lower in some cases. Probably not enough to even worry about. If it says put on 3 tons, put 3 tons on. If you need a lot of lime, apply it over 2 growing seasons. This is another myth that I hear all the time. It's just not true. I get into areas where I clear a forest lot and we put a food plot in a mountain ground where it's all sandstone, shale, forest environment where it's really acid soils, and sometimes I need 4 tons to the acre. Well, if you put 4 tons on pulverized limestone, and I'm talking about the stuff that has a very fine mesh to it, it's got to look like smoke, and then you want to incorporate that. Now, normally I don't want to do a lot of tillage, but when you're first starting out with a field, you're trying to get it squared away so you can grow what you want to grow, then you may have to till some of this stuff in. So you could till in manure, lime, or the 2 together. That's another thing I want to talk about at another time, is using manure, which will also move your pH quite a bit. Here's a good one. Pelletized lime is faster acting and you need less of it. That's not true at all. That was probably true back when they first came out with that product, which was it was made from industrial waste from marble companies. So that could have been a little bit higher in calcium carbonate equivalent, but what they use now is just pulverized lime again. They mix it with some binders and mash it into pellets. That's all it is. So it's the same. I can tell you that if you are thinking about putting 3 tons down of pelletized, you're going to go broke, number one, and your back is going to hurt. You just don't want that. So you want a chain drive truck delivery is the best, cheapest, easiest. You don't have to do anything but show the guy where to spread it. And you can also get a trailer that has a chain spreader on it. By chain spreader, I mean it's got like a little conveyor belt that pulls it out and applies it onto the spinners. If you try to run that through a cyclone spreader, if you try to use pulverized lime and a cyclone spreader, it won't work. Then you need the bag pelletized lime. Ask me how I know that. Tried it once, and that was the end of my cyclone spreader. A field needs to be limed every few years. I hear this a lot, where a guy will say, well, I haven't limed that in a while, I should lime it. Well, maybe not. You know, the soil test only cost you $10. Get the soil tested, see if you need it. And I can tell you that if you're not taking, I have this argument even with farmers, seed dealers, and everybody, if you're not taking the product away from the field, you're just feeding deer, and the deer are standing there and pooping it out as fast as they suck it in, and you have good biota in the soil like you should have, then you don't have to worry about pH. The biota in the soil and the cycling of nutrients will take care of that. Now, what causes a field to go acid are two things. In the Northeast, where you have a lot of rain, calcium will leach out of the soil. So even limestone-derived soils have a little bit of an acidic tendency. The other thing is nitrogen fertilizers. Whenever you put nitrogen fertilizer down in ammonia form, it breaks down in the soil and it creates it gives off hydrogen ions, which is what acidity actually is hydrogen. So you want to get to the point where you're using legumes, manures, compost, things like that. You want to get away from chemical fertilizers as much as you can. I love this one. You have to apply lime at least 6 months prior to planting, or it won't change the pH enough. pH will change in a few weeks, especially if you use the pulverized, the fine mesh, and you incorporate it in, you're good. Let's see. Oh, you don't need a soil test. I had a guy tell me this, you don't need a soil test, just put it on 3 tons to the acre every 5 years. Well, you don't know that. So grab some soil. Again, every few years, test your soil, see where you're at. So if you're reading it, you know, what I said in my article is that if you're reading this or you're listening to this, you're probably not one of those guys that's too cheap to spend $10 on a soil test. So I probably don't even have to talk about that. Now, I should say that the amount of lime needed to move your pH depends a little bit on the texture of your soil, whether it's clay, silt, sand, or whatever the mix is. Clay is more of a buffered soil, so the pH doesn't want to move as quickly, and you might need a little bit more lime on clay soil. So that's why they ask you in your soil test form to identify your soil. If you send it into a university, they're going to want to know that. Lime is too expensive. If you don't have a little bit of a scratch to buy a load of lime, then don't bother with your food plots. Just maybe run a disc, do some TSI out in the woods, and just don't worry about it, because that is the cheapest, the biggest bang for the buck that you're ever going to do to straighten out your soil to grow things like clover and all your cover crops that I'm going to talk about a lot in the future. I pay about $30 a ton. So 3 tons to the acre, and that lasts for many years because we do it right and we plant right. So $100 to the acre is probably the worst case scenario, actually. Now, if you have a really small plot, like if you're doing these little hidey hole type plots where you just want to hunt over it, and you want a little patch out in the woods, all you got to do is take pulverized lime or the pelletized, which is more expensive, rip it open and just spread it out. You know, it'll go down in the soil. The rain will take it down, and it'll leach down through there. It'll take a little bit longer, but it'll work. So I'm just reading my own blog article. So the bottom line is there's no excuse for not knowing what your pH is and how to correct it. I think there's enough information out there, but just watch out for some of these wives' tales that you hear all the time from people that just aren't true. So if you have any questions, let me know. Feel free to call me anytime. And I'm always available here, and I'll always answer any comments you have down below. So anything you want to ask, or you want to tell me I'm full of it, go ahead. We can argue that out. All right, you guys have a good spring. I hope you get a good planting done for your spring food plots and have plenty of deer to hunt next fall.